All right, it's our final segment this morning talking about the pork report here live on MorningLine on this Thursday. With us is Mark Cunningham from over at the Beacon Center. All right, Mark, so, I've kind of guided you through some of the questions we've had with our callers. I want to get from you what else is in the report that you think we should talk about?
Let me give Channel 5 credit and my guy Ben Hall. He did a great job finding this valet story, which said that these parking meter spaces they've given to kind of hotels for valets, and each space is worth about $6,000 per year on average, and each valet takes 3 spaces. So by the lane of what the law says, every valet should be paying $18,000 a year for the privilege of having those parking spaces. Unfortunately, the government of Nashville has not collected the money. All they collected is a $50 fee while getting rid of parking downtown, and we're not even getting the money for it. I mean, thankfully, Ben Hall found that, because that is when they're asking you to raise taxes that much money and they're not doing everything they can to make sure that they are collecting on what they already own. I think that's a real problem. And I'm glad that Ben Hall is able to point that out, because it's really egregious that the city government is not collecting that money. I mean, that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that we're just leaving on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great story from Ben along those lines. And it's frustrating. You wonder if part of that, again, is, these hotels, these big glitzy ones, and they keep popping up left and right, And that's for visitors coming here. If that was part of the deal, they're like, all right, we're going to build here, but we're going to need 3 valet places. We want you to give them to us. Is that the way it works?
Well, it's not written down as part of their deal agreement, I can tell you that, so I'm not sure. But we're also giving, like you said, most of these hotels, we're giving millions of our dollars, state and local, to come here. So on top of the fact that they're basically paying no taxes sometimes for years, we're also saying here's 3 free valet spaces, which again, by the letter of the law, that's not what it's supposed to be. We should be collecting about 18 grand from each valet spot. So I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it's just incompetence by the government or there's reason, but it's really frustrating as a citizen who got their property tax raised 34%.
What else jumps out at you, if not necessarily just here in the Nashville area, but as the state as a whole? We touched bases on the sock masks, but what other things perhaps kind of you thought, and maybe something that was a little different than what you've seen in the past?
Yeah, sure. So I think that the ice rink in Clarksville is a really interesting example where Montgomery County gave $130 million for this ice rink for basically 12-year-old birthday parties, and I guess so the Predators can practice there. And they say, okay, before we give this money, we have to have these commitments from Austin P and the Predators for life, and then we can do that money. They didn't even have the commitments. I think they only had a 5-year commitment from Austin P, even though so they basically changed the language, passed it anyway, and the commissioners, when they discussed it, they said, well, one commissioner said, well, I think we should give this to taxpayers to vote on at least, and that didn't even happen. They said, you know what, no, we know it's best. So when you talk about the city of Clarksville, Montgomery County, I mean, $130 million for an ice rink, it seems like a lot of money at a time where people are really struggling. And I would like to hear the explanation from the county mayor and from the commissioners about why they thought this was a good investment of tax dollars and didn't even ask the people about it. If we're going to have a huge project like this, you at least need to put it to a referendum and ask the taxpayers what they think.
Again, do you think a lot of times, and these politicians, they come and go, the projects obviously are here forever, that it's just something they can hang their hat on?
Yeah, I mean, sure, they can say, look, this could be their legacy that I built that. But ultimately, what I look at is my legacy is that I put the taxpayers of Montgomery County in debt. That's what the real legacy is of the county mayor there when he did that. So, yeah, I'm sure that's part of their reasoning, but they really need to think outside of just what they want people to think of them. And they should be doing, I mean, that's what public servants are. They should be doing what is best for taxpayers and what is best for the community, not what's best for their legacy. I think that's a whole, we need to change the way we think about that. And people should be proud to say, you know what, I saved you this much money and you've paid this much fewer taxes because of me and what I did.
Let me ask you just with regard to the Beacon Center's philosophy, I mean, is there some spending on things like, for instance, art or otherwise that you would condone, or are you simply against it all, or is it just depending on the size and scope and the time? There are arguments to be made. I don't know about an ice skating rink that costs that much for how much you get from it, but there are arguments to be made that some spending on, say, beautification or art, and everyone has a different opinion on what art is, and we've got some controversial examples here in Nashville, but is a positive thing in that art and things like this help make a city unique and a more livable place. And I think that's a fair argument. How do you balance that with the spending?
Or I think we call those sticks by the Gulch art too. So I think we really have an definition of what art is. But no, I mean, I think it's a great question. For us, I mean, we don't really believe in public art, because if you look at these cities across the country, New York, for example, a lot of that is privately funded art. It doesn't need to be the government doing that. I mean, there is individual benefactors who would do that. And you've seen that in places like New York and San Francisco and places like that. So I think that we believe that the core role of government is to take care of taxpayers and take care of people. So when we're talking about local governments, of course, infrastructure makes sense. I mean, there's some buildings and things that we may be okay with. Of course, if you're building a building for the senators or the representatives, yes, fine. Roads, education, and there is some things above that. But we ultimately believe the best government, especially local, is a limited government that, of course, takes care of its people, but isn't going and competing with the private sector or doing things, A, the private sector should do, or B, things that are just not in the purview of what most people think government is. A lot of those end up being pet projects, or they end up going to somebody that you know, or somebody that you want to give business to, and it's just not good for taxpayers. So I think that there's some examples that are less egregious than others, and maybe public art is one of those. Again, maybe not Sticks, but other public art where we don't agree with it, but that's a lot less offensive than giving hundreds of millions of dollars to a multinational corporation.
Gotcha. And I think it's real important to look at the time you're in right now, and during COVID and the hardship and all this. As much as I'm a supporter of the arts and the like, now is not the time to be spending big money on art for beautification when you have people who are out of work struggling to put food on the table. Okay, period. There's just no debate to that, especially in an extreme case like a pandemic. Let's take Bob. Bob, good morning. Hi, Bob.
Yeah, as long as you've got term limits and qualified immunity for public officials clear above the law, there's no law to affect them.
You think they're immune from it and they can get away with anything, huh?
Qualified immunity, and they gave you their self-theft, and they and the police can get away with anything.
Right, and qualified immunity does come up with law enforcement. I don't know. Do you think any type of, qualified immunity or otherwise has a hand in any of this type of spending, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say exactly that, but I mean, kind of the same concept of that these people can keep spending money and there's not really any recourse for it, especially if you have, you have to get elected every 4 years. But in that meantime, I mean, there's no real recourse for spending this money. And we really are, I mean, we have to say this, we're thankful for stations like News Channel 5 Plus, News Channel 5, and all the stations in national networks, because ultimately without them, a lot of these things would not come out. So we are lucky to have a great media here. I know a lot of times people complain about the media, especially on the national level, but we have a great group of media channels here who really do expose a lot of this and talk about corporate welfare and talk about these deals that some other outlets across the country don't do. So I do want to thank you, Nick, and everything you do there by exposing this and at least showing both sides so taxpayers have a choice of what they think is good spending and what they think is not.
I appreciate you saying that, and really it is our I-team to large measure that does so much of that. With regard to the pork report and the copy of it, is it something that the general public can get access to reading online or get to? And following up on that, since we've just got a few moments left here, I think your purpose for this is to highlight it and the public to read it. And what kind of action should or could someone, a general individual who sees something like this, take to try to address these issues?
I mean, I think this is one of the great things that we show this so everyone can decide what they think is important, what they think is not. But then individuals have the opportunity to do that. But by getting press, I mean, we are putting pressure on elected officials to say, well, look, I don't want to be in the pork report again next year because it makes me look bad. It's not votes, but it's something where I don't look good for this project. And I would urge people, if they see something they don't like, you can reach out to your elected officials. You can say, I don't like this. And then ultimately, in 4 years or whatever, I mean, you have the choice in your vote, and you can vote for whoever you want, but hopefully that you can become a more informed voter by seeing this and seeing some of the things that have gone on. So I think it's up to each individual person. But I mean, there's people that watch the show that probably have the direct connections with legislators, that are friends with legislators or friends with bureaucrats who can say, hey, I saw this. What was that about? And I just think it's a good way to hold them accountable, hold their feet to the fire. And the worst thing for a politician is bad press. So anytime you're on here, you're like, oh man, I'm in this pork report. That's not great for me. So I think that's one of the reasons we do it. And if you want to check it out, you go to beacontn.org. And on our front page, we have the pork report. You can read it in full. You can email us, let us know what you agree with, what you don't agree with. And we will always respond and get back to you about that. So it's beacontn.org. And the pork report should be on the front page.
What else does the Beacon Center do throughout the year, aside from compiling and doing the research for the report at the end of each year? I mean, are you up there on Capitol Hill? Are you lobbying one way or the other? And when you do, I mean...
Yeah, so I mean...
yeah.
Yeah, so my job, I try to educate the public. So I try to talk to media. We write op-eds talking about things like corporate welfare, trying to educate the media. And the Beacon Center is an educational group. So everything we do with that is kind of just telling people what we're working on, talking about good policy for the state. We do have a C4, which is Beacon Impact, which is kind of our sister organization. And they do lobby at the state legislature. We have lobbied a little bit at the local legislature, not as much yet. But it really is, we want to be a voice for the people. So it's something where, like, when we talked about this national tax increase, a lot of people didn't like it. And that's why we wanted to go to a referendum vote. And we kind of talked about the issues, and we tried to give the local government of Nashville other ideas. Instead of raising property tax 34%, we gave them a report. Here's 5 or 6 things you can do that can help make up this deficit. I think that we're just really a taxpayer advocate, and we do that in a number of ways, whether it's through op-eds, media, education, or our C4 lobbying at the state legislature for policies that we believe in.
And do you encourage folks, if they see what they think is, a very explicit case of waste, to contact you throughout the year? I mean, obviously you look everywhere, I suppose, to compile your pork report, media part of it, but what else?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. We look at Comptroller's report, but if you see pork throughout the year, please let us know. We only have, I think, 11 people on staff, and we can't see everything that's going on in maybe Johnson City or Kingsport. And because, we're not reading those newspapers every day like we are with the Nashville stuff. So if you have examples of pork, there's a lot that we haven't seen. And if it wasn't for the media and for Comptroller reports and just from general reporting, we would not find something. So please send any pork or anything else that you think might be interested in us. We are like we said, we are consistently free pro-taxpayer, and that means that sometimes we agree with Republicans, sometimes we agree with Democrats. So it's not an ideological thing, it's more of a taxpayer watchdog thing.
Would you agree with the assessment that some, label you a conservative think tank?
Well, I think that we're right of center because most of what we work on is fiscal, but we work with the ACLU on criminal justice reform, right? Corporate welfare is not been thought of as a conservative issue. So I think we're certainly right of center because all we work on is fiscal issues, and we don't really do social issues. Okay. But we work with both sides of the aisle. It just depends on the issue. And we say that our enemy 90% of the time, we'd rather label them our friend 10% of the time than our enemy 90% of the time. So we'll work with anybody, and we don't call politicians names, and we don't question their motives. What we do is we disagree with them when we do, and then we'll work with them when we agree on something. So we are certainly right of center fiscally, but I think that we work on both sides of the aisle for sure.
Gotcha. I just wish you'd bring the pig suit back.
Well, maybe I'll do it next year for you. If we do another interview next year, I'll see if we can order one. I can at least have the head on.
Okay, I'm just pulling your leg. Hey, listen, I really appreciate you coming on, Mark. Thank you. I look forward to this every year as well, to lay it out there. It's certainly something for people to look at, think about, and talk about it, and hopefully make a difference. I really appreciate you coming on this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks for everything.
Okay, have a happy holiday, my friend. Take care of yourself.
You as well.
All right, we'll take a break. When I come back, programming note right after this. Stay with us.